the is this? This has got to be the worst Champions League round of 16 that we have ever seen. The worst drawing that we have ever seen. Copenhagen, Man City, Porto, Arsenal, Leipzig, Madrid, PSG, Sociedad, PSV, Dortmund, Inter, Atleti, Napoli, Barcelona, Lazio, Bayern. Now you tell me which one of those fixtures excites you, because for me, absolutely none of them, but we're still going to talk about all of them. Let's go. And let's start with the first matchup, Copenhagen, City. Now obviously, anytime there's some sort of drawing or some sort of this or that, City's going to get the weakest opponent, and that's what happens here again. They get Copenhagen. However, don't sleep on Copenhagen. Copenhagen, obviously one of the main reasons that United was eliminated from Europe altogether, which was the biggest story coming out of the group stages. They beat Manchester United, given that Manchester United was down to 10 men, but they were still able to beat them. Obviously an impressive result there. Then they also went to Germany and tied Bayern 0-0, another massive result there. On the last game day, they beat Galatasaray to ensure that they are going to be able to stay in the Champions League. However, Lucas Lergaard, the goal scorer for Copenhagen, actually did get a red card in the 90th minute, and he's going to miss the first game against City, and that's only my first concern for this Copenhagen side. My second concern, they're actually not going to play a game until February 13th when City comes into town. I guess winters in Denmark are really bad, so instead of worrying about weather delays and rescheduling this and rescheduling that, the league just takes a break. So Copenhagen right now are on break. Now this can go either one of two ways. Either they're going to come out super prepared with a great game plan and super sharp and on point, or they're going to come out a little bit slow because they haven't played in a while, and I feel like that's the most likely. Now let's talk about City. Obviously, City is City. Treble last year, one of the biggest clubs, if not the biggest in the world right now. However, in the last 6 games, they only have 7 points. So that's obviously not up to par for City standards. I do think Pep Guardiola will figure it out between now and that game against Copenhagen. However, if Copenhagen were to play City today, I don't know. Maybe they can pull out something crazy in the first leg, put City on the back foot. However, I do think City's going to figure it out. My only concern for City, these Copenhagen games are going to come in an extremely tough stretch for City. They have Everton, then they have Copenhagen, Chelsea, Bournemouth, United, Copenhagen again, and then Liverpool. I'm not saying anything, but nothing is impossible. Come on, Copenhagen. Then we've got Porto versus Arsenal. Porto currently sit 3rd in the Portuguese league, but they could go to 1st today if they beat Sporting, overtaking my Benfica. Porto is always tough to play. They play kind of this dirty, tough brand of football. It's kind of gross, but it's kind of like, oh, they've got Pep at the back line. Obviously, they're very tough to beat at home. They're very tough to beat at home. And the first game between Arsenal and Porto is at home. Now, Porto obviously played Barca. They lost both games by 1, but they were very close games. Porto was always in the game until the very end. Every other game, they won by 2 or more. And they have a Benfica game sandwiched in between the 2 Arsenal games. So maybe that could relieve some pressure for Arsenal. And Arsenal currently top in the league by 1 point. They won every group game, but the last one where they tied 1-1 against PSV, but that game didn't matter. They lost to Villa 3 days prior. They'll play Liverpool 3 different times between now and then. 2 for the league, 1 for the FA Cup, so I think we're going to figure out a lot about Arsenal in those Liverpool games, playing them twice. Then they play Newcastle 3 days after the first leg, so it's also going to be a little bit of a tough stretch here for Arsenal. And my big asterisk, Arsenal needs to win that first game if they want any hope of going through. And I think they need to score first, because if Porto scores first in Portugal, they're going to put everybody at the back. They're going to play that counter-attacking football. If they get 1, they'll probably get 2, because Arsenal will open up. And if Porto goes into England with a lead, I'm sorry, Arsenal, but it's not going to do it. Not going to do it. And you think back to last year, Arsenal in the Europa League against Sporting, who is the, I guess you could say, the 3rd biggest club in Portugal. They tied both games and ended up losing on pens. So I feel like this is going to be very tough. If Arsenal couldn't beat Sporting last year, given it obviously it's a different team, Porto is a lot better than Sporting, especially this year. And I actually think that this is going to be my major upset. I think Porto is going to be able to beat Arsenal over the 2 legs, and Porto will go through over Arsenal. Don't hate me. Then we've got Red Bull Leipzig versus Real Madrid, and I feel like this could also be kind of an interesting matchup. Red Bull Leipzig, they beat Stuttgart. They tied Bayern, and they beat a 10-man Dortmund with a 91st minute goal. So obviously they're competing in the Bundesliga. They currently sit 3rd. I feel like this Red Bull Leipzig team is a little bit better than what people are giving them. They were up 2-0 against City. They ended up losing that game 3-2. So you can't have that, especially against Real Madrid in a knockout round. If you go up 2, they need to figure out a way to keep that result. They've got a lot of talent in Xavi Simons, Openda, Klosterman, Simican. However, My big asterisk for Red Bull Leipzig, they did just lose club legend Emil Forsberg, who is coming over to the New York Red Bulls, my team in the MLS, so obviously I'm gassed about that. But for Leipzig, I feel like they're losing a massive player, not only on the field, but also a leader. So we're going to see how Leipzig responds after losing Emil Forsberg. And then they've got Frankfurt, Leverkusen, Stuttgart, Real Madrid, Bayern, Real Madrid. So obviously, extremely tough couple of weeks there for Red Bull Leipzig as well. We'll see. Are they going to prioritize the Bundesliga? Are they going to go all in on the Champions League? Are they going to be able to balance out both? It's going to be interesting. Real Madrid obviously first right now in La Liga. However, Girona can go over Real Madrid into first today if they win over Alaves. They obviously ran the group with Napoli and Braga. They play Atleti in the Cup, then Atleti, Girona, Red Bull Leipzig, Sevilla, Red Bull Leipzig again. So obviously both teams are going to be in the midst of a very tough part of their season. Who's going to be able to respond better? Vinny Jr. injury, obviously I think he's going to come back. However, Alaba over this past weekend did just tear his ACL, so prayers up for Alaba, speedy recovery. However, I think that's going to be a big miss for Real Madrid as well. And I think Vinny could be key to fight the high pressing system of Red Bull Leipzig. I think it'll be an interesting match. I think it'll be a close match, but I think Real Madrid ultimately will be just a little bit too much for Leipzig. Real Madrid in this one. And then we've got PSG and we've got Real Sociedad. PSG obviously first in League One, but they are coming off back-to-back ties. In the 91st minute, Lille over this past weekend did manage to pull off a tie against PSG. PSG tied Dortmund in a game where I kind of wanted to see more. I wanted to see that fight. I wanted to see more PSG attacking. PSG were actually kind of closer to losing that game than they were to winning that game, in my opinion. Obviously, not having Dembele is a massive loss in that Dortmund game. However, Dembele will be back for Real Sociedad. He wasn't injured this time. As per usual, he just had a yellow card accumulation. Mbappe's been looking kind of sad. I think this is make or break. Real Madrid already said, hey, by January 15th, you need to tell us either you're coming or you're not. Now or never, we're going to move on. I think this will be it for Mbappe this year. And Real Sociedad, I feel so bad for them. They get first place in the group just to get against PSG. However, this Real Sociedad team, I think, is going to take a lot of people by storm. I think it could be the dark horse this year in the Champions League. They're extremely tough to beat. They've only lost 3 games all year. They beat my Benfica twice, obviously, so kind of sad. And then my key to the game, Traore. Traore was on the Reims team that actually beat PSG with Messi, with Neymar, with Mbappe, and Traore was playing in that game. Traore was pocketing their attackers, and Traore scored. So I think he's going to bring some of that experience into guarding Mbappe. I think it'll be a tough little matchup. It'll be a fun matchup to watch, and it's going to be extremely close. It's going to be extremely close. If PSG were to win, I think it's only going to be by a goal. However, I think that this is actually going to go down to pens. Gianluigi Donnarumma, Marino. See who we'll see who comes out on top there. But I'm saying it right now. PSG will not win straight out. Either it's going to be in pens that PSG wins, or Real Sociedad is going to win. Mark it down. Mark my words. PSV Dortmund. PSV obviously started very shaky, lost 4-0 to Arsenal. However, they then tied Lens. They tied Sevilla. They beat Lens and 10-men Sevilla, and then tied Arsenal. So they kind of picked up their form in the Champions League as they went on. PSV has a special place in my heart because they've got 2 Americans on the team, Dest and Pepe. They haven't lost or tied in the league. They are undefeated in the league. They've won every single game. Obviously, Feyenoord and Ajax are usually top of the table over there in the Erveders. However, right now, PSV, they haven't lost. They haven't tied every single game they've won. Feyenoord, they do play Feyenoord in between both of the legs, so that'll be a game that they're also focusing on. So is it going to distract them from Dortmund? Dortmund kind of underwhelming this year. They're 5th in the league right now, especially after last year where it came all the way down to decision day and they weren't able to win the league over Bayern. They topped the group of death, losing only 1 game against Paris in Paris by 1. So obviously they were able to kind of pick up their rhythm in the Champions League coming out of that group. They won in Newcastle. They've got a soft schedule before, but afterwards, after these 2 PSV games, they've got Frankfurt, Bayern, Stuttgart, Mönchengladbach, Leverkusen, and then Red Bull Leipzig. So I feel like they want to focus on these PSV games, win these out. I think Dortmund is going to take this one, but it'll make for some decent enough entertainment, and if nothing else, you get to see Americans in the Champions League. Let's go. And then we've got the quote-unquote best matchup here in the round of 16, but I think it's going to be the most boring to watch. Inter, Atleti, 2 very defensive teams. Inter obviously went to the final last year, so they've got kind of that experience over Atleti. They only lost 1 so far in the Serie A, which was against Sassuolo. Massive upset there. And they're extremely strong defensively. Again, beat my Benfica twice. We don't talk about it. Atleti currently sit 4th in La Liga. They lost to Bilbao this weekend. They lost to Barca and Las Palmas. They didn't lose in the Champions League, however, so they're kind of doing well there, even though they were in a pretty easy group. I don't really know where to go with these two. I don't think they're going to be the most entertaining games to watch. I think they're going to be both very strong defensively. Obviously, everybody knows the brand of a football that Atleti plays. However, I think that Inter Milan will be able to take this one. 1-0 on aggregate, 2-1 on aggregate. It'll be extremely low scoring. We'll see what happens. Napoli, Barcelona. Napoli currently sit 5th in Serie A. I think this will actually be the most high scoring of the matchups here in the round of 16. They sit 5th in Serie A, lost to Juve, Inter, Empoli, and Fiorentina. So I'm not really fully sold on this Napoli team this year. Last year, obviously, great story in the Champions League. We have Kvaratskhelia coming out of it. We've got a whole bunch of players that kind of made a name for themselves last year. They did lose their head coach, who went on and took on the Italian national team job. They've got Milan 10 days before the first game against Barca. Then they've got Juve in the middle of the two. And then they've got Inter 5 days later. So a lot of these teams are going to be going through some tough stretches here. I think it'll make for some interesting football. We'll see how they do in the league and how they do in the Champions League. It's obviously always tough to kind of balance them both out. Barcelona 3rd in La Liga. They lost one to Shakhtar and they lost one to Antwerp. Both are away. So I kind of slowed the roll on Barcelona there for a little bit. They had a very, very good start to this year. However, they haven't won in any of their last 3 matches. They started hot, kind of slipping. You kind of start seeing a little bit of frustration. Obviously, they're missing some key pieces. However, João Felix, João Cancelo, they're making me love Barcelona this year. My 2 Benfica boys, my 2 Portuguese boys. So I'm going to go Barcelona in this one simply for the fact that they've got my 2 Benfica boys on there. However, I think it could be pretty interesting. And I could see Napoli coming out and beating. And then in the last matchup, we have Lazio and we have Bayern. Lazio 11th in the Serie A. They just lost to Inter. More losses than wins. They've got 21 points in 16 games, but pulled a surprise tie with their goalkeeper scoring in the 91st minute against Atleti. That was the first match day or the second match day. I don't quite remember. And that was what got them over the hump into the Champions League. But, I mean, I guess they kind of have nothing to fight for really in the Serie A, so you could see them putting everything into Champions League. And then Bayern, 2nd in the Bundesliga. Big loss against Frankfurt, that 5-1 loss that everybody was talking about. But then they did come out, beat Stuttgart 3-0. They ran the table in the Champions League. They've got Leverkusen, then they've got Lazio, Red Bull Leipzig, and then Lazio again. So they've got some interesting games in there. However, if I had to bet my house on any of these matchups, going to be Bayern. I think Bayern is just going to absolutely wipe the floor with Lazio, but you never know. Lazio, nothing to fight for in the Serie A. Maybe they put it all into the Champions League and pull something out. And those are all the matchups that we have in this year's round of 16 in the Champions League. Again, you guys let me know how you guys feel about this drawing, but I feel like the overall consensus is kind of mid. There could be some upsets here, kind of some 50-50 games. No big names going up against each other, but it is what it is. Obviously, the last year that we have the group stages, there's still going to be a drawing next year, so we'll see how it goes on next year. But over here on this channel, I'm watching Europa League, baby. We've got Benfica in the Europa League, so I'll obviously be covering a little bit of that. I'll still be covering the Champions League, covering all sports. I appreciate you guys for watching this video. Let me know what upsets you guys think could be coming down the pipe here. Obviously, we have to wait till February, so we've got a little bit to wait, a little bit to speculate, but I wanted to make this video now, get it out to you guys. I appreciate each and every single one of you guys for watching. We are out of here. Peace.